Constantinople, 672 AD. You're a sailor aboard an Arab warship. All around you, the largest naval armada ever assembled in history surrounds Constantinople. Victory seems certain. The Byzantine Empire's days are numbered. Then, the horizon catches fire. Jets of incandescent liquid blast from the Byzantine ships under high pressure, like serpents of flame over the sea. And wherever this liquid touches the water burns too. Men throw themselves into the sea in desperation. The flames follow them beneath the surface. You're witnessing a weapon that shouldn't exist for another 1,000 years. Welcome, Explorer. In this episode, we're going to uncover ancient technologies that once existed and were wiped from history. 6 forbidden technologies that could have changed civilization forever. Each of these technologies could have transformed the world. Some would have saved lives. Others would have given ordinary people a kind of power that entire institutions never wanted them to have. And all of them share the same fate. They vanished at the exact moment when they most threatened something or someone. I'm Curious Chris, and this is yet another journey through the secrets history doesn't want you to know. Let's explore. First forbidden technology, Greek fire. This weapon became known as Greek fire. Invented by a Syrian engineer named Kallinikos, who defected to Constantinople, it was first deployed by Emperor Constantine IV against the Arab fleet, and it worked with devastating effect. The launch system used pressurized bronze tubes, called siphons, mounted on the prow of ships. The jets of flame reached from 10 to 15 meters. The fire stuck to wood, to flesh, to everything. It couldn't be put out with water. It produced thick, black smoke that blinded enemies even before the flames reached them. The Byzantine Empire used this technology to repel 2 major Arab sieges, in 674 and again in 717. Historians agree that without Greek fire, Constantinople would have fallen, and possibly all of Europe with it. For more than 600 years, this weapon guaranteed Byzantine naval supremacy. Now here's the part no textbook really manages to explain. At some point between 1200 and 1300, the formula disappeared. It wasn't gradual. There are no records of decline. The formula was kept as a state secret at the highest level, known only to the imperial family and a select group of military engineers, under penalty of death for anyone who revealed it. When the Byzantine Empire fell in 1453, the secret died with it. Historian John Haldon investigated it in 2006. Chemist J.R. Partington studied the topic in 1960. Neither managed to determine the exact composition. Modern experiments with petroleum-based mixtures, quicklime, and sulfur have reproduced some of the effects described, but never all of them at the same time. And this is where the official reasoning starts to fall apart. If Greek fire was just petroleum and sulfur, substances we still have today, why has no one in 800 years managed to fully recreate its effects? Arab, Venetian, and Genoese spies poured immense resources into stealing the formula. Every one of them failed completely. Medieval sources suggest that Greek fire production facilities were disaster zones, constant explosions, toxic smoke, fatal accidents. Some historians raise a disturbing possibility. Maybe this technology wasn't just chemistry. Maybe it was chemistry combined with precision engineering. A system so sophisticated that the formula alone was completely useless. Perhaps the knowledge was deliberately compartmentalized. One group knew the formula. Another built the siphons. A third understood the firing process. When any link in that chain broke, the entire system died with it. And no Byzantine emperor at any point in history chose to pass this knowledge on to allies or successor states. A weapon that saved Europe from collapse, deliberately erased. Why? That question stayed with me for years, and the more I dug for answers, the more I realized Greek fire wasn't an isolated case. There was a pattern, and the next item on this list will show you something that made even the best engineers in the world throw up their hands and admit, this should not be possible. The Antikythera mechanism. The year is approximately 150 BC. You're on the island of Rhodes, watching an unknown Greek engineer hunched over a workbench. In front of him, a box the size of a shoe. Inside, 30 bronze gears mesh with mathematical precision, tracking the sun, the moon, and the planets in the sky. The device predicts eclipses decades in advance. It compensates for the moon's irregular orbit. It even records the calendar of the Olympic Games. This is not science fiction. This is the Antikythera mechanism, a technology that should not exist for more than 1,000 years, and nothing even remotely similar would be created again for the next 1,400 years. I've had a replica of this in my office for years, and every time I hold it in my hands, it still amazes me, because what you're looking at is not a work of art. It's a primitive computer, built 2,100 years ago, and the most disturbing part? It was erased from history so completely that it took us decades to understand what it even was. The Antikythera mechanism was discovered in 1901 by sponge divers exploring a Roman shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera. The wreck dates from 70 to 60 BC, carrying luxury objects probably destined for Rome. Among statues and ceramics, there was a corroded block of bronze that was ignored for decades. Only in 1951 did Yale professor Derek de Sola Price begin studying it seriously. His 1974 paper, Gears from the Greeks, revealed to the world what it really was: an astronomical calculator of absurd sophistication. And look at what CT scans revealed starting in 2005. The mechanism contains differential gears, a technology forbidden by time itself. According to history books, that kind of engineering would only be invented in the 17th century for clockmaking. There is a system of planetary gears with an epicyclic mechanism that would not reappear in Western engineering until 1675. A gap of 1,675 years. It's as if archaeologists found a smartphone in a Viking tomb. The astronomical precision is breathtaking. The mechanism tracks the 19-year Metonic cycle, the 76-year Callippic cycle, the 18-year Saros cycle for eclipse prediction, and the 54-year Exeligmos cycle. It includes a pin and slot mechanism to compensate for the moon's elliptical orbit, applying in practice the astronomical theories of Hipparchus from 140 BC. The gears have triangular teeth, cut by hand, with tolerances under 0.5 millimeter. The device contains more than 3,500 characters in ancient Greek engraved on its surface. An instruction manual, only partially recovered. No ancient text describes a device like this. None. And that alone should already make us ask questions. The official explanation is simple. Bronze was far too valuable. When devices broke or their owners died, they were melted down and reused. We only have this one because it sank in a shipwreck before being destroyed. The technology existed, but it was rare, expensive, and non-essential. A luxury for wealthy patrons. When Rome shifted its focus from Greek philosophy to conquest and administration, this kind of engineering simply stopped being produced. And that's fine. I accept that as a possibility. But that explanation requires us to believe that a technology of this level was created a single time, maybe twice, and then completely lost. No other gear trains, no workshops, no training schools, no failed prototypes. The Antikythera mechanism represents at least a century of iterative development. You don't create a 30-gear differential computer on the first try. There should be simpler predecessors, more rudimentary attempts. There are none. And there's something even more unsettling. Whoever built this mechanism showed knowledge of the moon's elliptical orbit, a concept that, in our historical timeline, would only be formally described by Kepler in the 17th century. This isn't written on any surviving scroll. It's embedded in the gears themselves. Some researchers point to the destruction of the Library of Alexandria. Others say Rome simply prioritized military conquest over pure research. But there is a third possibility that few dare to consider. What if this knowledge was seen as dangerous or heretical by Christian authorities who associated complex mechanical devices with pagan mysticism, leading to its active suppression, and then absolute silence? No emperor bragged about it. No philosopher debated it. No engineering treatise mentions it. A technology that would have changed the world, simply wiped from humanity's collective memory. This is the kind of silence that keeps me exploring, because when history erases something this completely, there is usually a very specific reason. And the next item on this list involves an art so precise, so lethal, so advanced, that modern scientists needed electron microscopes to understand what medieval blacksmiths were doing with charcoal and fire, something science only found a name for in 1991, but which already existed in swords forged 300 years before that. Damascus steel. The year is approximately 300 AD. You're in the forges of Damascus. A blacksmith heats a crucible of Wootz steel imported from India. He repeats this process hundreds of times, heating, cooling, folding. The surface of the blade that emerges shows wavy patterns like wet silk. The crusaders who faced these swords on the battlefield left accounts that sounded like exaggeration. Blades that cut European swords in half. That kept a sharp edge after repeated use. That sliced a silk scarf tossed into the air. This wasn't legend. It was technology. I once held an authentic Damascus sword in a private collection in Istanbul. The owner didn't allow photos, but he did let me run my finger along the blade. Carefully. And those patterns on the surface. They look like water frozen in metal, as if the steel itself were alive. What I didn't know at that moment was that I was touching medieval nanotechnology. Damascus steel was produced mainly in the Middle East between about 300 and 1750, using Wootz steel imported from specific regions of India. Its reputation peaked during the Crusades between 1095 and 1291, when Islamic blades routinely outperformed European swords. In 2006, a team led by Professor Peter Poffler at the University of Dresden used transmission electron microscopy to analyze authentic samples of Damascus steel. What they found sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Carbon nanotubes and cementite nanowires. Let me translate that. Carbon nanotubes are cylindrical molecules with a diameter on the order of a billionth of a meter. Western science only identified and named them in 1991, when Sumio Iijima published his landmark paper. This structure gave the steel strength and flexibility at the same time, properties that seem to contradict each other. Medieval blacksmiths, working with charcoal furnaces and hand tools, were inadvertently creating a microstructure at the nanotechnological level, without knowing what they were doing, following only techniques passed down orally from master to apprentice for generations. Around 1750, production simply stopped. The sources of Indian Wootz steel dried up. The mines were exhausted, trade routes were disrupted, and in less than a generation, the knowledge of how to forge true Damascus steel was lost. So completely that by around 1900, experts debated whether the historical accounts were exaggerated. The discovery of nanotubes in 2006 proved the legends were real. The official explanation is straightforward. Without that specific raw material, Indian Wootz steel with its trace elements of vanadium, tungsten, and chromium acting as catalysts for nanotube formation, the technique simply didn't work with European steel from other sources. The art died with the supply of its raw material. But here's what bothers me about that explanation. European blacksmiths tried to copy Damascus steel for 400 years during the Crusades. They had access to captured blades, to defecting blacksmiths, to metallurgy treatises. They never succeeded, not even close. And the loss wasn't gradual. Between 1750 and 1800, less than 50 years, the knowledge vanished so completely, it was as if it had never existed. Forging techniques usually evolve and spread. This one simply stopped, as if a critical piece of knowledge had been deliberately suppressed. Some researchers point out something that rarely appears in the official versions. Damascus steel was a status symbol for Islamic nobility. Its production may have been restricted to prevent enemies from accessing the technology. And when swords began to become obsolete in the face of firearms in the 18th century, the last master smiths may have made a deliberate choice to let the knowledge die rather than sell it to the colonial powers that were beginning to dominate the region. It wasn't an accident. It was a decision. And there's something science still hasn't answered. If modern smiths have managed to recreate visual patterns similar to Damascus steel, why does no contemporary blade match exactly the same performance as the originals? What is still missing from that formula? From medieval forges, we now move to something that is literally above our heads and beneath our feet. A formula so durable that the structures it created 2,000 years ago are getting stronger over time, while our bridges and overpasses built in the 1960s are already crumbling. A civilization that fell 1,500 years ago is still teaching us how to build better, and we only realize that now. Roman concrete. The year is approximately 126 AD. You're in Rome, watching engineers mix volcanic ash with lime and seawater in a specific proportion. They have no calculators, no modern chemistry, no industrial additives. But what they're creating will last for millennia and will get stronger with every year it spends submerged in seawater. This is Roman concrete. And the formula that made it extraordinary was lost for more than 2,500 years. I've stood beneath this dome 3 times, and every time it's the same feeling. A mix of awe and unease. Because you're standing under 4,500 tons of unreinforced concrete. No steel. No modern support of any kind. And this structure has been standing for 1,900 years. Now think about an overpass built in the 1960s. It's already cracking, already being replaced. Something is fundamentally wrong with that comparison. Roman opus caementicium was the foundation of Rome's architectural dominance for more than 700 years. The recipe was documented by the architect Vitruvius in De Architectura, around 15 BC, and by Pliny the Elder in Natural History in 77 AD. But the instructions were incomplete or misinterpreted over the following centuries. After the fall of Rome, the technique was gradually forgotten. Medieval Europe went back to simple stone masonry. In 2013, researchers from the University of California, Berkeley, and Italy's National Research Council began analyzing samples from Roman marine structures. What they found flipped decades of construction theory upside down. Roman concrete submerged in seawater for 2,000 years was getting stronger. forming crystalline structures that automatically filled microcracks. Our modern concrete in seawater starts to deteriorate in less than 50 years. In 2023, a team at MIT led by Professor Admir Masic finally cracked the central secret. The Romans used quicklime, not hydrated lime as everyone had assumed, creating exothermic reactions during mixing that produced what we call limeclasts. Previously dismissed as imperfections, these clasts are actually the self-healing mechanism of the concrete. When a microcrack forms and water seeps in, the limeclasts dissolve and recrystallize, sealing the crack before it can grow. A self-healing technology developed empirically 2,000 years ago. The combination was specific. Volcanic ash from the region of Naples, rich in silica and alumina, mixed with quicklime and seawater. The chemical reaction created crystals of aluminum tobermarite that continuously strengthened the concrete over time. The harbor of Caesarea, built 2,000 years ago, is still structurally intact. The foundations of the Colosseum? Also intact. And the aqueducts? Intact. Still carrying water to this day. The official explanation for the loss of this technology is geographic. When the Roman Empire fell, access to Italian volcanic ash disappeared for most of Europe. Medieval builders in France, England, and Germany simply didn't have the necessary deposits. And when Europe later reunited under colonial empires, Portland cement, invented in 1824, was cheaper, faster, and worked in any climate. No one bothered to revive the Roman method. But here's what bothers me. The studies on the self-healing properties of Roman concrete were published in 2013. It took more than a decade before anyone seriously investigated the limeclasts. Modern engineers, with all our computational science, advanced chemistry, and available technology, took 10 years to ask a question any Roman builder could have answered in 5 minutes. Why? Modern concrete is a trillion-dollar industry. Steel-reinforced concrete demands constant maintenance and periodic replacement. If we switched to a Roman-style formula that lasts 2,000 years, entire sectors of the economy would lose their business model. I'm not saying there's a grand conspiracy. I'm saying that sometimes the reason a technology stays lost isn't ignorance. It's convenience. And how many other properties of Roman concrete have we still not discovered? Simply because no one has really bothered to look closely at the structures that survived. From the stones of Rome, we now move to something completely different. A material discovered not by a scientist, not by a university, not by a military contractor, by a hairdresser, in a garage in Yorkshire, England. And what he created withstood heat equivalent to the surface of the sun. Starlite. The year is 1993. You're watching the most popular science show on British television, the BBC's Tomorrow's World. The host points an industrial blowtorch directly at an egg coated with a beige paste. The flame is at 100 degrees Celsius. After 5 minutes, the host turns off the torch, picks up the egg with his bare hand, and the shell is cool to the touch. The material is called Starlite, invented by Maurice Ward, a hairdresser from Yorkshire who mixed organic compounds in his own garage. And what he created should not exist. When I first came across this case, I honestly thought it was a hoax. An amateur hairdresser, with no formal scientific training, in a small-town English garage, claiming to have created the most heat-resistant material ever tested in human history. But then, I found the reports from NASA and from the UK government's atomic weapons establishment. And I stopped laughing, because it really is true. Starlite withstood temperatures above 10,000 degrees Celsius without charring, cracking, or conducting heat. It was lightweight, could be applied like paint, and was non-toxic. Unlike modern thermal shields for spacecraft, which burn away during re-entry, Starlite did not ablate. It formed a permanent insulating barrier. NASA confirmed the results after testing at White Sands. But the most disturbing test took place on Foulness Island, at the UK government's atomic weapons establishment. They subjected the material to a simulated nuclear flash. The side coated with Starlite survived. The uncoated steel on the other side vaporized. Then Morris Ward died in 2011, without licensing the formula, without publishing the components. Boeing, the British Ministry of Defense, and fire safety companies tried to negotiate with him for years. He rejected every deal, claiming he feared the formula would be stolen. He filed patents, but deliberately omitted the key ingredients. The Ward family claims to still hold the formula in a safety deposit box today, but cites legal and financial obstacles to bringing it to market. And here's the question no official report answers. Did NASA and the military contractors who tested Starlite retain enough data to recreate the material? Are there coatings in military or aerospace use today that derive from Starlite but remain classified? A material that could save lives in fires, in spacecraft re-entries, in industrial applications simply ceased to exist because one man died with the secret in his head. Or at least, that's what we're told. From 20th century garages, we now go back almost 2,000 years. To the palace of a Roman emperor. To the moment when an artisan walked into a room with a glass cup and threw it onto the marble floor. The cup didn't shatter. It dented. And the emperor, instead of rewarding the inventor, ordered his immediate execution. The flexible glass. Fragments of glass show up in first-century Roman excavations all over the Mediterranean basin. I've catalogued dozens of them in the field. Ordinary glass. Fragile. Shattered by time. But there is one account, documented by 3 independent historians over 200 years, of a Roman glass that didn't behave that way. A glass you could throw on the floor, and it would dent like metal. The year is approximately 25 AD. You're in Emperor Tiberius's palace on the island of Capri. An artisan walks into the room holding a glass cup. Calmly, he throws it onto the marble floor. The cup hits with a metallic sound and does not shatter. It only dents, like beaten silver. The artisan picks it up, presses the dent out with his thumb, and presents it to the emperor intact. This is his moment of triumph, the invention that should make him rich. But Tiberius doesn't applaud. He asks a single question. Does anyone else know how to make this? The artisan answers, No, Caesar. Only I possess the secret. And with that, Tiberius orders his immediate execution. The formula for vitrum flexile flexible glass dies on the spot. This story appears in 3 independent Roman sources. Pliny the Elder, in Natural History, written in 77 AD. Petronius, in the Satyricon, around the year 60. Cassius Dio, in Roman History, in the 3rd century. 3 authors, 200 years between the first and the last, all describing the same central event. Pliny was a careful naturalist. He documented hundreds of materials and techniques with scientific precision for his time. He was not the kind of man who casually repeated wild fantasies without question. According to the sources, Tiberius's motivation was economic. Gold and silver were valued in part for their durability in tableware and luxury objects. An unbreakable glass would destroy that market, and with it, a significant slice of imperial revenue and elite wealth. So the technology was suppressed, and suppressed so completely that no archaeological fragment of flexible glass has ever been found. The most widely accepted explanation among historians and materials scientists is that the artisan probably invented a primitive form of tempered or annealed glass, more impact-resistant than ordinary glass, and the story was exaggerated in retelling. The detail about denting like metal may simply be dramatic embellishment added over generations. As a historical figure, Tiberius was known for erratic cruelty. So the core of the story an inventor killed for threatening economic interests could be true, while the material itself was just unusually tough glass, not the magical substance later sources describe. But here's what that explanation doesn't resolve. The Romans had access to advanced chemistry. They created concrete that lasts millennia, complex pigments, sophisticated metal alloys. Is it really impossible that they empirically arrived at a glass formulation, perhaps with organic additives, perhaps with a specific tempering process, that modern science hasn't replicated simply because it never looked? And if vitrum flexile was just slightly tougher glass, why the need for execution? The Romans valued engineering innovation. They rewarded people who built better aqueducts, better weapons. Why kill someone for creating durable tableware unless the material was genuinely revolutionary enough to threaten economic stability? Some materials historians raise a rarely discussed possibility. What if the artisan was using a composite material, glass fibers, interwoven in an organic matrix, creating something that looked like glass but behaved like flexible metal? The Romans had access to plant resins, animal glues, and fine metalworking. A layered material isn't impossible. It would be analogous to modern carbon fiber, a technology we only named in the 20th century, but whose physical principle has always existed. And there's a question archaeologists rarely ask. If fragments of vitrum flexile exist in some collection, how would we recognize them? We'd likely classify them as ordinary Roman glass because that's exactly what they would look like on visual inspection. A technology erased by imperial decree, so completely that we don't even know whether we're literally walking over the evidence without recognizing it. 6 technologies, 6 stories separated by centuries and continents, and a single pattern running through all of them. The official explanation for each case is always the same: accident, scarcity, political collapse. But technologies that work, that would change the world, do not disappear by accident. They disappear when they threaten power, profit, belief, or control. When someone, at some point, decides the world is safer without them. History is written by the winners, but the secrets are written by silence. Now, I need your help. Which of these 6 technologies impacted you the most? Scroll down to the comments and tell me. Which one had you already heard about? And if there's a topic you want my help to explore and uncover in a future video, leave your suggestion in the comments. The best ideas become episodes. If you made it this far, you are exactly the kind of explorer this channel needs. So hit the like button to support my work and share this video with your friends. Click subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss any expedition. This is Curious Chris, and I'm already preparing our next journey. See you next time.